Hello, I'm Robert, voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And I've just changed the title to make it a little bit clearer. Why Trump's secondary sanctions on Russian fossil fuel exports can lead to possible peace in Ukraine if they work. If they don't work, the war just continues. So I'm just continuing from my previous video. I talked previously about how the sanctions could well work. And for instance, this is about how India is only buying fossil fuels from Russia because of the very low prices, and this has only been doing that since the war started. And it was only buying 2% of its oil from Russia before the war started. So it's quite reasonable that India might well agree that it's worth for all the other benefits of trading with the United States to stop buying Russian oil. It can buy everything else from Russia, but just not in fossil fuels. And then this might well lead to both India and China significantly reduce or stop the oil that they buy from Russia. Then this tackles the price of the war. And without being able to pay for the war, then the war has to stop, because modern wars are very dependent on having the money to be able to pay for them. And without that, you can't fight in a modern war. And so then Putin will have the big question, does he, so that's where I reached the end of last one. My summary here is that he's got a big question, does he tax, for instance, could be an 8.7% tax on all Russian workers, I should say there. That's one way to do it. And then if that's quite a big tax for people who they just are not in any way threatened by Ukraine. There's no risk to ordinary Russians from Ukraine. They don't risk being forced to sing the Ukrainian national anthem or to have their kids abducted and forcibly abducted and adopted to Ukrainian parents, or they don't risk being imprisoned by the Ukrainians. They don't risk being tortured by the Ukrainians. There's no risk at all to the Russian citizens. The only risk is of fighting in the war. And the Ukraine only attacks military targets in Russia. There's a very minute risk from being harmed by the missiles from Ukraine. So why would they be bothered about the war's ending? So it's going to be quite difficult to persuade Russian citizens that they should pay 8.7% or whatever the tax is. That's my best estimate of it, if I got it right. So this is why the war might well lead to Russia stopping. So now this is what I want to talk about this time, is about just go into more detail and give you some background as to how much priority Putin is putting into this war and how very minute the actual progress is. So Russia gave up Russian access to Syria and the Middle East and the Tartar port. And what did he give up in order to do that? Gave it up in order to try and take this tiny city called Pokrovsk. And if you look at the bigger map, it's a tiny, tiny little indent you can barely see in that picture up there. That big indent there, and then there's a little one there. So I think that's the big one, and that's the little one just there. See? Wait a minute. Can you see it? Yes, you can see it. You can see my pointer. So it's just there, that one just there at the end of my pointer. And in order to try and advance a few more fields there, in December, Putin gave up Russian control of the whole of Syria and the Tartar port in the Mediterranean and the airbase in the Mediterranean, the only foreign port that Russia has outside the former Soviet Union. He gave all that up. He decided that he couldn't send a few thousand soldiers and a few fighter jets to go and help Assad protect his regime against rebels in open-top trucks, most of them. In order to keep, and the reason, because he wants to keep fighting to try and take Pokrovsk. And Russia is just incredibly weak at fighting. It has a 10-to-1 advantage in the air. Even today, and right from the beginning of the war, it's had 10 times as many fighter jets, military aircraft, than Ukraine has in the war. At the beginning of the war, Ukraine only had the MiG-29s. Now it has the F-16s, which are roughly equivalent to the best Russian fighter jets, because it's got very, very few of those. And why isn't Russia taking over Ukrainian airspace? Especially in 2022, when Ukraine had almost no air defences to speak of. And the answer is it's just not very good at fighting in the air. A NATO country with such a superiority would have control of Ukrainian airspace, even if they had fighter jets of equal quality on both sides. They'd be able to take over with 10 times as many. And NATO has vastly superior aircraft to the Russians, with its 5th generation F-35s. And F-16s, which are ancient technology in NATO, are roughly equivalent to the best Russian fighter jets. So look at this. It's got a 10-to-1 superiority in the air of military aircraft. It's got cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that it can fire from over 2,000 kilometers away for the cruise missiles from its bombers, and fire them it could fire all its cruise missiles at Pokrovsk if it wanted to, but it doesn't do that. It fires them at Ukrainian cities. So it fires them at Kiev and Odessa and places like that, where they serve no military value, but they mostly fire them at power stations and then at places where civilians live, and they don't seem to really focus very much on military targets. So why hasn't Russia taken Pokrovsk? It's been fighting to take this tiny place. It's been fighting to take it for over 6 months now. And before that, its big objective from the end of August, when the Ukrainians did a surprise attack into Russia, and they took a small city called Sudza with 5,000 inhabitants, so in peacetime. So they occupied Sudza, or however you say it, and Russia made its prime objective to push Ukraine out of Russia, the first ever incursion into Russia, I think, since the Second World War. And Russia has its main objective from August 2024 all the way through to the spring of this year to try and liberate a small city of 5,000 people. So the size of the city tells you roughly how many streets need to be liberated. So 5,000 is really a very small city to try to liberate. And they fought for more than 6 months, and they had to recruit 30,000 extra North Korean soldiers with this huge military advantage that they should have on paper, but they can't take advantage of it. So now, given all this background, just start thinking, is this a country that can challenge NATO? Remember, they gave up Syria, and they couldn't challenge rebels in open trucks. And they're just moving so slowly in Donbass. And oh yes, I forgot to say on that drawing. So this is Donbass. If you look at that rather faint boundary there, that's the boundary of Donbass. It continues up here somewhere. Oh yes, up there. And then it continues down there. It's rather a strange shape, and it comes down here somewhere. And that's Donbass. To the right of that is Luhansk. So one of Putin's prime objectives in this war is to take all of Donbass. So in order to achieve that, then, which is Donetsk, sorry, that's Donetsk, and that's Luhansk, and together they form Donbass. And he wants to take all of Donbass, and he's got pretty much all of Luhansk, so he's got this bit left that he wants to take. That's a small area. That's his prime objective. The experts I follow, they don't think that Russia is anywhere near being able to take Pokrovsk. And he'll probably be fighting all summer and into the winter next year to try and take Pokrovsk. It would take years and years for them to take those other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different small cities, and to take the whole of Donbass. So that's how limited Putin's military objectives are in Ukraine. And it's for this that he is fighting And it's for this that he's not willing to have a ceasefire, even for a month, in order to keep doing this. So with those very limited objectives, think, how would it make sense for him to attack NATO? It wouldn't. So now, why does Putin bluff all the time? And the thing is that, remember I said that Ukraine is vastly superior, NATO is vastly superior to Russia. So NATO has these Tomahawk cruise missiles. They're very much like the Russian ones. They can travel over 2,400 kilometers, but they're very precise. And they've had them since 1983, when they were first used in combat in the Gulf War. And Putin, his drone manufacturers, for instance, they are just done in the open because he knows that they're not at risk of being attacked by Ukraine. And I'm sure where they are here. So I just show the distance by foot because it gives you an idea of distance, 1,600 kilometers. So this is just out, even if Ukraine gets the JASM ER, which is a extended range missile that the US has considered sending to them, but they've just didn't until Biden was considering it. Others just before the election, Trump has considered it, and so far they've not yet decided to send it to Ukraine. But that wouldn't be able to get to these two drone factories. So you've heard in the news about all the drone strikes on Ukraine, and all those drones are made here or here, and they're not buried deep under the ground. They're just normal factories where they're making drones, and they're out of reach of Ukraine. Ukraine can't hit them. So if Ukraine had the Tomahawk cruise missiles, which is like the ones that US fires at the Houthis, and it's also the ones that the United States fired from a submarine in order to at the Nanats and another one of the nuclear enrichment sites in Iran. And so it's a very standard missile that all Russia, United States has vast numbers of them. And so if the United States were to give a few dozen or a few hundred to Ukraine, then they could very quickly destroy these two factories. And then that would be the end of Russia would no longer be able to make these drones. And so at least for a few months, while Russia makes a new factory somewhere further away and deep underground, then that would end all these bombing on Ukraine. But so how does Putin manage to stop the United States from giving Ukraine the Tomahawks so they could destroy these factories? And the only way he does it is with words, using his bluffs. And by using his nuclear bluffs, that's why he does it. He's managed to protect his two factories so he can make thousands of drones a month to fire them at Ukraine, and that's why he does it. That's why he does his bluffs. It's not because he wants to attack NATO, which is ridiculous. It's because he wants to stop Ukraine's allies from giving it the Tomahawks. And so that's one thing. And another example are the F-35s. And I haven't added a graphic here, but I've shared it in many of my other debunks. So if Ukraine had the NATO F-35 fighter jets with the cross-section like a supersonic potato, then the war would be very soon over. On the first day, Ukraine would have complete air control of the Russian airspace above occupied Ukraine and any border areas that they wanted to have air control over. And then it would be able to start picking out air defences and other things from the air, and the war wouldn't likely last very much longer after that. But there's not even being remotely a possibility. Italy's not going to consider that. And why don't they consider that? Because of Putin's bluffs again. So that's why he does them. Now look at Russia's, just to show how extraordinarily weak Russia is. So Russia is the only world power without a single aircraft carrier. And aircraft carriers are very important because it's the only way. Remember, it's lost its foreign airport in Syria. The only way it can move its aircraft to some place that is at any distance from Russia is an aircraft carrier. And it hasn't got an aircraft carrier anymore. So that means it can't project air power anywhere except places close enough to Russia for the fighter jets to get there in friendly territory. And from those bases, the range of a fighter jet, which isn't very long, very distant. It couldn't get from Russia to cross the Atlantic or anything like that. I mean, it couldn't get. They're very limited in the range of fighter jets. They should put in the range of fighter jets, especially once they've got fuel on them, once they've got bombs in carrying them. So a fighter. Remember that with you got an idea from Israel. So the F-16s, which are roughly similar to what Russia has, then they could get from Israel to Iran, which is a bit over about 1,000 kilometers away, and the Russian fighter jets, they could only go further than that sort of a distance if they could, with a reasonable load of bombs on them, if they had in-air refueling, which they had to send other planes along to refuel the fighter jets. So it's very, very limited if you don't have an aircraft carrier, how far you can go. And Russia's aircraft carrier, it was actually made in Ukraine. Their ICBMs, the land-based ICBMs, were also made in Ukraine. Ukraine was one of the main military parts of the Soviet Union, and that's why Ukraine is so capable and so able to rapidly build up its own military capabilities, because it's a very important military region of former Soviet Union. And when Russia lost Ukraine, they lost the only place it could build aircraft carriers. And it sold 4 of the 4 Soviet Union aircraft carriers. One of them is still operating in India, and that's the only operating former Soviet Union aircraft carrier in the world. The other 3 were sold for scrap or for theme parks. 2 of them are theme parks in China, and one was sold for scrap. Was just dismantled for scrap in South Korea. And so Russia had 1 remaining aircraft carrier at the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And this aircraft carrier, it was being built, and I can't remember the details. Anyway, it was built in Ukraine. No, I'm not sure if I know all the details about it. I don't think I researched that. But it was built in Ukraine originally, and let's go and look at it. And it's famous for its very thick black smoke. And that's because it burns a heavy tarry oil which is called mazout. And modern aircraft carriers, they are either powered by gas turbines, which are very clean and easy to maintain, or they're powered by nuclear reactors. The Soviet Union never developed the capability for a nuclear reactor that can power an aircraft carrier. There are nuclear reactors that can power submarines, but they never managed to develop a nuclear reactor for an aircraft carrier. So this is all that Russia had, which was this aircraft carrier that burns this mazout stuff. And this caused all sorts of problems, because it's just a very smoky, very dirty kind of fuel. And it's only been used once. The Admiral Kuznetsov. It was used in 2016 to 17 off the coast of Syria. And 2 of the aircraft that it was carrying crashed and were lost when it tried to dock on the aircraft carrier. One of them ran out of fuel while waiting to land, and the other one, when it landed, a wire broke or something, and it went off into the sea. So it's a very poorly designed, not very well tested aircraft carrier. And since then, Russia has put in mothballs and eventually decided it's going to sell it probably for scrap, or for anyone who wants to buy it, for whatever purpose. And that's the only aircraft carrier left, and it hasn't been operating for many years. Throughout the Ukraine war, it hasn't had an aircraft carrier. And this is about the other ones, the Soviet Union ones, all made in Ukraine, and they're all gone. So India is the only country that has a former Soviet Union aircraft carrier. And called the Cursed Bucket of Balls, the Admiral Kuznetsov. And so it's very much confined. The Russian army, it's got really no way to get to anywhere else in the world. It's not going to be able to fight very well without aircraft. It depends mainly on railway lines for its logistics and supplies, and supplemented by trucks. And it's just stuck in the Russian territory now and neighbouring countries. They can't do that much beyond. They can do military exercises with their warships, but they're pretty useless for actually fighting anywhere. So now compare the rest of the world. So you've got the USA has 4 aircraft carriers in service, and it has 11 in total at any time. UK has 2 aircraft carriers. France has 1, the French one is nuclear powered, the UK ones are gas powered, the USA ones I think they're mostly nuclear powered. India has 2, one of them from the former Soviet Union, one that it built itself. China has 3, and Russia has none. And it's got no prospect of getting another one. These are the 2 UK's UK's aircraft carriers. The United Kingdom has infinitely more, because 2 divided by 0 is infinity. So the United Kingdom has got infinitely more aircraft carriers than Russia is one way to think about it. And so does France, and so do any of these countries. That's the Russians' only aircraft carrier. It's been out of service since 2018, so that's 4 years before the Ukraine war, and now it's going to be sold or scrapped or whatever. And the United States has by far the largest global reach of any country, so it's got 750 bases throughout the world. If there was a country that could fight a world war, then it would be the United States. And it's not interested in fighting a world war. What it uses these bases for are for local wars. The United States can very quickly, just like it got its aircraft there was a base there that it had somewhere in the Indian Ocean or something, and then they flew to Iran from there. And then it has submarines there, and it's got warships, it's got aircraft carriers all around the world. It had one in the Mediterranean at the time, I think, and so might have had one here, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's aircraft carriers and bases for planes that can fly off, and it could fly long distances by refueling and going to bases around the world. And Russia can't do that. So United States the United States, United Kingdom and France are about the only countries that really could fight a world war, but they're not interested in that. So here the French foreign bases, all the ones in pink, so they kept quite a few of them all around the world. And you can find the French and the British together, and they've got quite a lot of foreign bases. Just about if there isn't a French base, there's likely to be a United Kingdom base, and anywhere in the world practically that there's anywhere to do with any of the Western powers, if they ever had colonies anywhere in the world, then you could be pretty sure that there's a United States base not very far away from that in one of those colonies. And then, of course, Australia is a close ally. So, but if we go and look at Russia, they've just got these red ones here, and that's all it's got left. Those 2 are now gone, so we just got those ones there. I think that's probably Belarus, I'm not sure. Yes, I think that's Belarus. And I'm reading that right? That's Black Sea, that's Caspian Sea, and then this is further east. So Russia is very confined to its own land area and the former Soviet Union, and it can't fight beyond there. You can't win a war with nukes, absolutely you can't. No possibility. So now, why we can be so confident there won't be a world war? So I've been confident since the war started. I've never had any concerns whatsoever. It's nothing like the Cold War. During the Cold War, we got these booklets came through telling us all how to prepare for what to do if there was a nuclear war. If you ask the typical person, I sometimes ask the people who are scared of nuclear war, what would you do? Do you know what to do if there was a nuclear war? And some of them think they do know, and they say things like building a nuclear bunker or eating potassium iodide tablets. Neither of those are sensible things to do. Nobody knows the real instructions of the younger people, And the reason is because the information is there if you go and look in the right place in all the various government websites, but they don't need to tell us because there's no risk. So I think that's one of the clearest ways of seeing that there's no risk of a nuclear war. And then nobody's going to, we all knew what to do, but nobody needs to know today. Putin is extremely risk averse. He planned to invade Ukraine already, probably in 2020. And he's not a baby, he's not a toddler. He masters impulse control, probably aged 3 or 4, like most people do. And he's so controlled that experienced politicians like Macron had no idea he was planning to invade Ukraine, even though he was just playing a charade all the way along, just for probably ever since 2020. He's just been pretending that he's interested in peace, because he'd already decided to invade Ukraine, certainly before his military operation, his military exercise in 2021. So he plans for a long time. That's the sort of person he is. He only invaded because he expected to take over all of Ukraine in 14 days. It would be easier than Crimea. So he's just incredibly careful and cautious. And we see this throughout the war. I follow this war very closely. A lot of people who contact me, they just read clickbait and they panic because of that. I have been following this war since before it started, and I look very closely at military experts, Ukraine's own military experts. I look at the RUSI, which is the UK think tank that advises the UK government. I look at the Russia Matters. I look at the Institute of the Study of War. I followed many experts, and whenever I find a new expert on X that is saying sensible things about Ukraine, about Russia, about the war, then I follow them. And so I've got a lot of experts I follow now over the last 3 years of doing that, several years of doing that. And so it's based on that I am so confident there can't be another world war. They never talk about these things. So it's very clear the only bluffs to try to handicap Ukraine. It's never done any preparation to use nukes. The United States keep saying they never see any preparations. We have numerous precautions to place to prevent a mistake, so he's not going to do it by mistake. And he's never going to do it for any intentionally. And as I say, there's not one serious mainstream news story about how to protect yourselves from conflict. And let's just look here about what I was saying. So these are some of the people I follow. I don't follow them every day, all of them. I follow the United Institute for the Study of War most days, especially if people ask me about Russia. Numerous experts on the X. Whenever I go on X, then they're likely tweeting about Ukraine, so I see what they say most days. And then I check the Institute of the Study of War pretty often, and none of them have talked about the World War. So I thought, for writing this, I thought, well, okay, I'll do a bit of a search and see. I haven't seen anything in the Institute of Study of War. Let's do this a bit more methodically. Let's search the website for what it says about World War. And I found that when they say World War, they had World War I or World War II, because they do mention those from time to time because of historical incidents during World Wars and things that are kind of relevant to what they're talking about or whatever. And so they say, well, do they talk about World War III? And they do, but very, very occasionally, and it's never about there being a risk of a world war. So the most recent one was 2023, and it's talking about how the Kremlin is using propaganda to try and prevent the French from supporting Ukraine. So that's the only mention as discussion of propaganda. And the other ones are just all similar to that. I think they're propaganda or just other very tangential mentions. They just do not consider and do not talk about the possibility of a world war, because it's obvious to everyone that Russia has no interest and it would make no sense. He's shown no preparation for doing a world war. He's absolutely no interest in it. He's not showed any sign of trying to attack NATO or preparing to attack NATO. So it's all just words, and they're interested in the reality of the war, and not interested in all this propaganda and words. and they just very rarely mention them in whenever they happen to discuss Russian propaganda. And the last time Institute of Study of Wars has discussed that, of Russian propaganda about World War, is 2023 in a single sentence. So this is why Putin will never use nukes, and I talk there about what. So since I mentioned and what you would be told if there was a risk of a nuclear war, then you would be told about fallout. So how many of you have been told about fallout and what to do and how to protect yourself from fallout? The main thing in nuclear war is to protect yourself from getting radiation sickness. And the way you do that is that the intense radiation is in the mushroom cloud. The mushroom cloud is very heavy, and in about 10 or 15 minutes after its nuclear explosion, it falls from the sky. And the dust being heavy is easy to see, and it's just very obvious falling out of the sky. And your job is to get away from that dust. The more distance you can put between yourself and that dust, the less your risk of radiation sickness. That's the instruction. And you've only got 10 or 15 minutes. So that's why I said it's pointless having a bunker in your back garden if you're out shopping, say. You're never going to get to it. So, or if you're out, doing your job, or at work or whatever. So, and there's no point in potassium iodine tablets, because potassium iodine is for protecting people who have eaten contaminated radioactive material that's got into their food. And you should not eat any food that could possibly have any of this dust in it. So you're not going to be eating food unless you know it's safe. And like, for instance, tin food or something like that. So then the radioactivity gets less intense very, very quickly. So you get into an enclosed area inside your house, and you ideally, the booklet that we got, it's told to us, once you got inside, get yourself a table, pile stuff on top of it and around it, and that'll give you extra protection from the dust, from the radioactivity, from the dust. Get as far away, find a place with no outside windows if possible, but it doesn't really matter. Main thing is just get away from the dust. And then you stay there for a couple of days, and the radioactivity gets very much less radioactive very, very quickly. And after 2 days, you can safely walk through it without any risk of radiation sickness, and travel to wherever else might be a better place, if you know a better place to be than where you are. But by then, most of the world is a nuclear weapon-free zone, and you would have helicopters flying over with loud hailers telling you what to do. You'd buy the people driving along the roads, you'd get the emergency services from your own country and from other countries would be helping you. So that is what we would all be told, but we're not, because there's no risk. And I've yet to meet anyone in the younger generation who knows what to do without me telling them first, or reading one of my blog posts first. And I've never seen a newspaper article saying that, have you? Have you, amongst all these clickbait stories claiming there's a risk of a world war, have any of them ever said, look, there is a real risk of a world war, we could have nukes fall, so this is what you do? No, they never say that. And the material is there, it's on the websites. You can go and find it on the government websites, telling you what to do to protect yourself if there's a nuclear war. And the journalists aren't running it because they know there's no risk. The governments are not running it because they know there's no risk. So I think that's the clearest way of all for people who are not following this very closely, to just see that the military advisors and the governments, they know there's no risk. So it's just clickbait, it's just trying to get clicks and views and stuff like that. And this side then talk about why we don't have any risk. And this is talking about how another thing that people have just briefly mentioned, that how many of you know that let's put this in a more neutral way. So do you think China and India want to continue to have nukes? Or are they amongst the people who want to quickly eliminate nukes? And how about Iran? What's its position? So every year there is a proposition that is put to the United States General Assembly. And this is a vote for this is a nuclear-free Middle East I've got here, so that's perhaps much easier to see. Just about everyone votes for nuclear-free Middle East. Only Israel votes against that one, and then United States and a couple of other countries abstain, and sometimes others don't vote and don't get around to voting. But so that's very easy to see. But what about the proposition every year to convene a conference to very rapidly get rid of nukes worldwide? What do you think? Do you think India or China would vote for that, or they would vote against it? I'll give you for free that United States, Russia, Europe, they vote against it every year. And the European nuclear powers, they always vote against it. What do you think China and India do? Well, it's India that puts forward this resolution every year, so it of course votes for it. And China is the other major nuclear power that votes for it every year. So all this narrative about, look, we need to protect against China because China is trying to make lots of nukes as quickly as possible, which it isn't. China wants the world to very rapidly eliminate all nukes, and so does India. And we get a very confused narrative. And then Israel, because of the lot of sympathy with Israel in the West, we get a very confused narrative about the nuclear weapons in the Middle East. I would be surprised if many people in 1,000 would know that all the countries in the Middle East vote every year, apart from Israel, for a nuclear weapon-free Middle East. So these are things that very few people know. It's not very buggy if someone did an article saying all this. Very few people would click or share it because it's not dramatic, it's not scary, but that's the truth. So anyway, hopefully this helps some of you to be less scared and to have a better idea of what's going on here. So I'll upload this, and this is my second video of the two on this topic of why you've got no reason to be. There's nothing to be scared of here, and that Trump's soldiers, a reminder of the main thing, why they're going to lead to possible peace in Ukraine, and if they don't, the war just continues, and that's all it's about. And just remind yourself. So, yeah, well, you see the first video. The first video describes that bit, and now it's the second part, and then we got to there. Okay, so I'll finish that. I'll upload it. Check in the video description for a link to this this blog post. Any questions, then comment on the blog post about it, and I'll answer your questions as best I can, or comment on this video, or contact me. I've got lots of contact details in at the end of the blog post, and so hopefully help some of you to be a bit less scared now.